So let's just go ahead and get started. We only have 30 minutes today. And as usual, Tim and I have packed in as much content as possible in the time that we are given to present. Today, we're going to be talking about parent cancellations, which is something I think that as behavior analysts is a common theme that we encounter in parent training. So before we get started, just quick housekeeping. If you've been to the series, you've seen the slide multiple times. We love your questions, so drop them into the Q&A. We have chat turned off just so it's easier to filter through them. And then we will send out this recording in the next 2 to 3 days so that you can watch it again, share it with your staff, and just think about all the things that we've talked about today.
Every question is valuable. Even considerations, even comments that might lead to expansion on ideas or something. So please feel free to flood it, don't hold back. Agreed.
Okay, well, let's quickly set the stage for what we're talking about. We're here to talk about cancellations. And as I was thinking about these, you're going to see I had a lot of reflection in the process of preparing for this webinar. Some of it is slightly humorous, others are not, but I was thinking about what kind of quote I could incorporate that would really reflect the message we're trying to send as we're talking about parent cancellations. And I actually love this one by Albert Einstein. I think there's some iteration of this that we see commonly expressed in quotes, but essentially it's that we cannot solve our own problems if we use the same thinking that we used when we created them. And I think this fundamentally applies to how we commonly approach problems or barriers we face with parent training and cancellations. And it's my position that when we are delivering parent training services that the family has consented to and that we know that they want, we need to plan for and arrange for contingencies around the parent and family, just as we do our learners. Oftentimes we don't do that. We default to thinking of parents as these different types of entities. But one philosophy that I've really held true and that was an integral part of the way that I was trained in the field, and now I've used it in the 20 plus years that I've been around, it's that the learner is never wrong. And if we extend that philosophy to the families we work with, parents and children in those families, and we remove blame from the narrative, we're left looking at behavioral patterns. And as behavior analysts, we're really good at analyzing those. So today, I'm going to give you some quick fixes for cancellations. But the reality is there is no quick fix for this. This is not something where we can say, do these 2 things and you'll never have a cancellation again. Because parents and families, they're humans, they're organisms in complex systems with complex contingencies. And so I will have a slide with quick fixes or tips to reduce cancellations topically, but we really want to look at also some really systemic solutions to cancellations and things that you can do as a clinician or as an organization to pivot the way that you are proactively and reactively thinking about these and responding to them. So here are the things we're going to talk about, and we'll move through them. Tim and I will both be discussing them as we move through and talk about them. Okay, so as I said, there's no quick fix in sight. And Tim, I warned you that I was going to do this. Tim and I were talking about cancellations recently and just thinking, brainstorming different things we could talk about and bring to the table. And Tim, you said, and I totally loved, you're like, we need to think about, we should ask the dentist. Like, no one wants to go to the dentist. They have so many cancellations. And I think you were serious, but you were also like joking, but you were. So we finished talking, and later that day I was thinking about it and I was like, you know what? I actually do cancel and reschedule dental appointments frequently. It's annoying because you have to schedule far out, but like, I don't like going to the dentist. There's no particular reason. It's not a preferred thing for me. So I went online and I Googled it. I wrote, I'm a dentist. How do I stop patient cancellations? And their tips were actually pretty decent. I think they're in alignment with a lot of things we put in place. So check for you, Tim, because it's a great idea.
Well, just to add, we are the opposite. I never miss a dentist appointment. I love them. I don't think, I cannot recall in recent memory a time where I have I've had to reschedule, and that is not an indictment on Kristin's approach to dentistry. But it is, I think, a fundamental opportunity to observe a distinction. I get a lot of value from going to the dentist. I would go to the dentist more often. I would have no problem with that. And I think that for me, a position I take when it comes to of not avoiding cancellations, they are in some ways unavoidable. They are going to happen, but we can talk more about the degree to which they happen a little bit more later. If what we do is deliver value to the person, whether it's a dentist delivering value to the patient, whether it is a behavior analyst delivering value to the family, value is going to be different for every single person. I am not suggesting that Kristin does not find value in going to the dentist. It's just that in a dynamic system, which we all find ourselves in, value is on a continuum for all of the various alternatives we have access to. And sometimes the value can be enhanced or diminished the closer the appointment comes. And I don't want to linger too much on this point, but let us not forget the deep well of very, very what I would consider to be bench science, meaning hard science, from the experimental analysis of behavior. We know exactly some of the patterns and can predict with some accuracy certain aspects when we know the right factors to look at. And I'll be quiet now as we pivot back to Kristin, because we're gonna look at some of those factors today.
Mm-hmm. And just to follow up on that, I do not like the dentist, but I always go regularly. So even if a cancellation or reschedule occurs, I still find value in going there. And I think that's something that's kind of been a common thread through these webinars is when we can make sure that the parents are finding value in what we're doing, that means they're going to come, because when people value something, they do it. So here's some tips that we have. Just, you've probably seen some version of these before, but these are really topical things you can do to be minimizing cancellations, right? We can be reminding parents before the appointment, a week before or a day before, just, hey, the appointment's at this time. We can also schedule at times that we know work for parents, or where we know we'll see parents. So we're going to have a parent training session. It's going to be a parent education session between me and the parent after they drop their child off at their ABA session, because I know that they're less likely to cancel an ABA session for their child. So then when they come to drop off their child, they'll see me. With that, though, we also want to make sure that we are scheduling at times where parents can actively engage. I can't tell you how many times I have scheduled a 7 p.m. or 7:30 or 8 p.m. parent training session back, especially in my earlier days, providing parent training services, because that's when the kids would be occupied, or, all the nighttime busyness was done and the parents said that they would be prepared to participate, only to then be parents and be exhausted. Like, who's ready to learn at 8 p.m. at night? Not a lot of people. So really making sure that the times that we schedule parent training is not only schedulally appropriate, but also optimal for engagement. And then creating consistent routines, right? So every other Tuesday, we're meeting at 9 o'clock, and that's our routine, so that it becomes ingrained in the family schedule. So as different things come in the family schedule, that our time is not something that will be missed or maybe didn't make it on the calendar, that it's something that's common and the family knows, and it becomes part of how they operate as a family with their schedule. And then little things like rescheduling at the time of cancellation. I'll tell you right now, my dentist office, if they cancel an appointment with me or I cancel, they are texting me immediately to send follow-up dates and times. They follow up multiple times over text and phone, just to make sure that that appointment gets scheduled. And I think that that does decrease the likelihood of just a reschedule not happening. Okay, enough with dentists. That's the last we're going to talk about them. But now I want to dive into the meatiness of a functional approach to parent cancellations, because we can talk about it topographically and systemically. And when we're looking at the cancellations topographically, we're really looking at changing those things that are surface level. Like, it's like this tip of this iceberg, right? Just because it's topographical, really quick, doesn't mean that it is ineffective or less important. It just means that it's more on that surface level. So let's take, for example, a small adjustment to the time of a parent training session. Let's say a parent is always running late to their parent training session or cancels because they're dropping off their kid at school. A topical change to that could be either addressing the routine that's problematic in the morning that's making them late, or it could be changing the time of the session. That topical change may completely change the parent's ability to be in the session and they're able to show up all the time. So that's an important change. But when we're also looking at those topical changes and they're not working, and we're seeing continued cancellations, either like repeated or over time, we really need to look more systemically at what is happening with that parent training and the cancellations in particular, and take a holistic approach, because there's lots of connected elements that result in cancellations. It's not going to just be the content of the parent training we're providing. There's many different things that we're going to dive into. And so we're really going to take this multi-pronged approach to looking at cancellations today, because again, it's not as simple as just saying show up to the appointment. There's a lot that goes into it. Okay, so one thing that I actually rarely see that I think is something to address is that cancellations within parent training, like you said, Tim, they're inevitable. And frequent cancellations and attrition from our parent training services is very common, not only in behavior analysis, but in other disciplines where people are providing services like parent training. So when we look at parent training for children with conduct disorders or ADHD provided by social workers, counselors, psychologists, we see the same rates of cancellation and attrition. And, there's been recent literature reviews that have cited those rates, but we can also look back to, like, I think it's Kasdan in 1996 cited this as a huge problem when we're thinking about behavioral parent training and parents participating in sessions. So this is not just a problem in the here and now, but this has been a longitudinal problem. And so being able to talk openly to parents about this being something that can happen in the life of their parent training as they get busy and as, they get more comfortable within the program, is, I think, really important. I don't think it's something that we should leave as like a secret or something we're monitoring. I think talking about it up front is a huge step toward acknowledging with parents and creating that therapeutic relationship that, hey, we realize you have a lot going on in your life. Cancellations are actually something that can occur a lot. And so we want to figure out how to work with you to prevent that from happening and be proactive. And I think that balancing empathy while also not making it okay to cancel is the way that we want to go through that, because I want to empathize with the family who's canceling a session to, do a movie night, or canceling a session because things are just crazy and they just mentally cannot handle someone being in their house. That's one thing. But then normalizing that over time is, I think, where we get in this cycle of almost, I don't want to say over empathizing, that's not the right term, but we don't want to make it okay to cancel or to reschedule us, because ultimately things that are stressful, that's why we're there to help, right? We're giving the family the tools they need to manage that stress and those tough nights. And so today we're going to talk a lot about using different antecedent strategies to decrease the likelihood of those cancellations, and identifying those potential antecedents to cancellations with parents and setting events, and then addressing them. Have any thoughts, Tim?
I'll say something here at this slide after you go through it, actually.
Yeah, so I just thought, here's like a common thing that we can say to parents as we are talking to them, right? That we just say, it's common that sometimes, I don't know if I'd say for parents to always cancel parent training, but it's something that can happen. And then working with the parent to say, here's what the model is going to look like, right? So what I anticipate based on the goals that we've decided is that you and I will have, I suggest we have like a parent education session at the beginning, and then we'll move into practicing. And then, I'll coach you going through things, I'll model them, so the parents know exactly what that parent training session will look like. And then we can then ask them, okay, what parts of this do you think may be stressful, or do you not prefer, or do you want to adjust based on, who you are as a human and how you're showing up as a parent? And oftentimes I think that makes parents, puts them on the spot to be really self-aware, and they may not be there. I think, like, I know for me, I could tell you exactly like 10 things that would make me uncomfortable. And I think, to be honest, anybody who acts like it's not uncomfortable to be trained as a parent and coached for the first time with someone in their home is not being honest, because it's a weird thing at first, right? To have someone coach you through, no matter how awesome they are. And so just being able to talk about those things and say, here's what it's going to look like. What do you think? And then really asking questions in the areas that we know are likely to cause cancellations, right? So this is what we're doing. This is the frequency. What kind of things do you think could be problematic for you related to your schedule? Or related to your home environment? I've talked a lot in this webinar series about how I'm a person who, when my house is messy, it stresses me out. And I most certainly, if my house is messy, would not want someone coming over to coach me through an arrival routine and see like the 10,000 shoes my kids have left by the front door and like all the things going through. So working with a BCBA who's providing me services, we could choose times of day or times of week for our sessions that will decrease the likelihood that my house is chaotic, right? Like maybe on a Friday is better for me when the kids have been out of the house all week and I've had a chance to pick up throughout the week. Or on a day where I had a housekeeper come and clean my house, which I don't actually have, but some families might. Then we also just want to think again about families getting to appointments. So not every family drives a car. Some families walk or ride the bus to appointments, and that can be cumbersome. So we want to make sure that families are able to get there, and then really look at the best times that parents can be fully engaged. Because again, we want them to show up and be excited to learn and be ready to absorb and actively participate in creating this experience, right? We don't want it to happen to them. And so if we can make sure that we are proactively selecting times that don't just work in the schedule, but allow the parents to show up and actively participate, that's where we'll see that maximal success.
And I invite you to consider these insights as a way to action. You might find yourself sitting there, and I don't want to put thoughts, I don't want to, give you thoughts that you may or may not be having, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of you say, well, I do that. Yes, good. I don't do all of it, maybe necessarily, or that's a good idea. And we pick these insights, but turn these insights into action by getting behavior analytic around it. Whether you're a BCBA that has a caseload, think of that caseload as your organization. Or perhaps you find yourself at the organizational level and you're looking at across all of the practices of this particular service provision. Take data, understand the patterns across families, for individual families, and then from there, you can start to take action around that. What would it look like if you gave a family a blank calendar and said, you pick the time? I'm not suggesting that you actually take that, but look at how those times cluster for that family, across families, and then you can start making actionable, realistic steps towards making things more probabilistic that they're going to attend and maintain that scheduled appointment. And so if you learn that, look, most of my cancellations cluster around this or this group of families, well, maybe you allocate energy elsewhere so that you can build momentum around a parent training practice where you can demonstrate, look, when we do this and we do it like this, we get these types of results. You bring that to a family or a group of families for which it's a constant struggle, they may be more enticed into giving it a shot. And you can make a specific ask. Give me 6 weeks. Give me 6 weeks, because what I've noticed from the data that I've collected here is that when I have 6 weeks, I get this. And I think I can do that for you. And I think that that becomes a really valuable takeaway for families to see a potential opportunity that they might not be able to see, because we can give them literature review after article, after insight, after expert to say, if you do this, you get better outcomes. And you know what? It doesn't always work that way. And so the effort and care that you bring to building rapport with these families is going to go a long way in them trusting you when you say, give me 6 weeks. And I think we can make something like this happen for you and your family. My ears perk up when I hear things like that. So anyway, keep going, Kristin.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So as Tim said, having that conversation with parents, part of the great thing about Care Coordinator is our lessons are written such that they give you they kind of set the stage for these conversations to happen, whether a parent's just starting off or whether a parent is in the middle of parent training. You can assign lessons to them at any point. And so here are a grouping of lessons that could be great to assign to a parent, right? Hey, I just want to refresh on what your role is as a parent in parent training, or what the benefits of attendance are for parent training. The lessons with the asterisks by them are going to be released later in the week with our most recent release. But these are, again, great things to just always revamp on. And the parents have an active participation piece where they can then do the homework, think about it, and come to you. And so it really sets the stage for you to be having these types of conversations in a way that's just natural in your parent training. Okay, so just dovetailing off of what Tim said here. Also, I think that we are behavior analysts. And once we can isolate that this is a pattern of behavior, we have the tools to work for it. What we need to do, though, is actively use them. So I laid this out and I was thinking about families I've worked with in the past, my last organization I worked at provided family-centered intervention. So parent training was a part of the model. It was the model. That was not something that was an a la carte option for parents. They signed on knowing that and wanting to receive parent training. And still with families, I thought of one family in particular who would cancel parent training sessions every now and then. And I thought to myself, okay, if I had had something like this as a clinician, where I actually used this for a family and said, okay, what are the setting events that I know are likely to maybe cause or potentiate a parent training cancellation or affect attendance? I'm going to list those. The antecedents, I think, are a little more tricky because some things are happening privately that won't be reported to us. So we may not know exactly what the thing is that caused the cancellation. It may just be that a calendar alert came up, right? But if we can look at the setting events and antecedents kind of as this cluster and think of them, what does it look like, or what do these look like for things happening in the home? So let's list setting events in the home. Let's list them with parent training. Has the parent had 3 sessions in a row where we've had to problem solve a routine, so there hasn't been a lot of progress? So we're having some issues, right, with matching law, like they're putting in a lot of effort and not seeing a lot of change, or they're putting in a lot of effort and only seeing slight change, or maybe they're seeing a lot of change, but the effort's just too high, right? And then thinking interactions with one another. What's going on with the family dynamic? And what's going on with the environment? Like I said, are they having renovations? Is the house messy? Is the house just chaos because school year has started and we're trying to establish new routines? Then we need to think about what those consequences are that the parents get from canceling. And I think we can think about them in a topical or more easily defined. What are they accessing or avoiding, right? Like clearly they're avoiding the parent training session, but they could also be accessing 1 hour of time where the kids are out of the house and they're just like at home and they get to sit and watch Love is Blind. And that's okay. Parents need that time. But also we can think about it in terms of the things that we control and the things that are out of our control in terms of how we can adjust contingencies. Like, for example, if we have a family that's going through a divorce, there's a lot of things that could be going on that are out of our control and should not be in our control, right? There could be issues with relationships amongst family members. And though we want to be there as a support system, parents are not in a place where they can show up. So then we need to evaluate how can we support them and how can we not. So if you have a family with cancellations, I would suggest writing out just this, like, very familiar to all of us flow, and so having either yourself or having your BCBAs list the things under here that could be going on with the family. And if the list is really short, that's great feedback to then take a step back and, as Tim was saying, have those discussions with the family and look at what's going on in these different categories with the family that could be potentiating or causing those cancellations or just infrequent attendance. So I kind of threw some stuff specific to sessions, because I think what I have in the blue column is really a lot of times what can be going on behind closed doors that parents either don't think they have a say in or don't want to admit. So when we're thinking about the systemic changes to our procedures and the way that we're implementing parent training, we can think about it in these kind of ways. Data collection systems. I will be the first to admit, and I'm sure any family that was with me from 2007 to 2011 will be the first to tell you I was terrible at taking the perspective of families with the data that I asked them to collect. And I think even Carrie was in a webinar with us a few weeks ago, or we did a behavioral view episode, which I highly recommend checking out. And we talked about the creation of the content. But she even talked about a speech therapist giving her some homework recently as a parent for data collection. And she's like, I didn't do any of it. And like, I'm a BCBA, I should know better. So I think evaluating the data collection systems that we have in place, both in how cumbersome they are and the types of information that it gives parents and how it makes them feel about that, is important. Also thinking about the procedures we use. Are they easy to implement? And are they in alignment with values and culture? With some families, there may be misalignment that we've just missed as behavior analysts, and we need to take a step back and evaluate that. I also think the amount of practice required. So is this something every day? Can it be easily practiced? So I was thinking of this yesterday when I came home with my kids after school. I have 3 children, and everybody just kind of came in the house, and I had been gone all day, and everybody just like exploded into the house. And it was a little bit of like a mess to get the bags where they go and the lunches where they go. And I thought to myself, this is a perfect example of where an arrival routine would not be a solution for me because we're all getting home at the same time. I'm not prepared and showing up my best. So even though that's a stressful time for me, if someone came in and said, let's focus on that, here's your procedure, there's no way I can implement that with fidelity. Even though it's what I want to see change, that's not the time to change it, right? So we can parse out, what are the skills we need to learn and what is the best time and place to learn those.
You know what I love about this, Kristin, is that so much of all of this exemplifies what most parent training is, which is I'm coming to you to give you more of something to do.
Yeah.
And that's not always the way we approach our therapeutic relationship with the people we serve, whether they be kids or adolescents or adults. We usually meet them where they are, and we gradually shape them towards somewhere where we're going. And I think if we took that same attitude more systemically across all of our efforts, some of you guys do this expertly, and you meet the parent where they are, such that when they see you, you are not an SD, or in this case, perhaps not an SD, because reinforcement is not made available. You signal for them more. What if you signaled for them insight, excitement, opportunity? And you'd have to shape them toward that. So consider what stimulus functions you bear for the parent. It takes a little bit of humility, which is never a bad investment to make. And so, yeah, just a little bit of perspective taking can go a long way in developing that value proposition for them.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think too, thinking about things we talked about in the last webinar we did in this series around establishing that relationship of Tim, you're going to love this trademark Tim Fuller right here, but approaching it as a listener and with curiosity. So I'm not coming in and feeling like someone's talking bad about my procedures, but I'm just really listening and realizing that the family is the expert on them and what works. And I think too, like you said, Tim, sometimes things work. Sometimes the procedures we give work and they work really well, but they're just so cumbersome to implement, or it's just one thing more that even though it may produce the result or my kid's progress is actually so important to me, but just like I'm so bogged down with what else is going on in my life that I just don't even have it in me to put in that effort on the front to see the result in the end. And we know that parents with kids with developmental disabilities experience this. And so here is an example of where we can be, like you said, Tim, we can look at shaping toward what we want to see. So if we have a parent who's saying, all these things on the left, that their house is messy and the nighttime routine is challenging, but by the time it's nighttime, they're so exhausted. They're just like, get in your room. I don't even want to do a routine. Don't even bring a token board into my house. Like I'm done. They eat dinner late. Kids are, when they're left alone, it's unstructured. The lack of structure is challenging. What we can do is take a more systemic response to that. So if we want to teach the parents to establish great routines and evaluate the effectiveness of those routines, let's do it in a time and place where they're ready to show up and they're optimistic and they're energetic and it's easy and they'll contact that reinforcement. Because that nighttime routine, as a parent, I can tell you right now, that's not going to be it. And so, just really looking at what is the actual behavior we want to teach, and then maybe we teach it in a different context so the parents can show up and be more ready to learn. And really working with the family. We talked again last week about really establishing that therapeutic relationship and being a person who is a comfortable and good listener for the family, and helping them really look at what does your ideal look like and then what does it feel like? Because I can tell you right now, I would love for my kids to arrive home from school, put everything away, have everything beautiful, but that also needs to feel like to me that it's easy, that I'm not the one that's manning the ship the entire time for the rest of eternity, right? So we want parents to both have the look and feel of the life that they want. And really, again, look at, make sure that we also have time built out for parents where they can be parents and do the things they love. And that's part of when we look at parent training, and I think more globally, a family as a system, which is what we do with our curriculum. We really try to look at, each person is equally important in that family, and they're equally valuable. And the way that I interact with my environment affects the way that I parent my children. So if my environment is not set up for me to show up and be the parent I want to be, not only can I learn strategies for interacting with my children, but I may need support in arranging my environment so that I can show up to the extent possible. And there's a lot of really great literature in the PBIS literature around looking at that family system. And I've given resources before around like great books that are good for that, and great family-centered assessments that you can implement with your families that will give you suggestions for what to do, or at least give you directions, not suggestions for what to do. From those data, you can determine what to do. And then, as Tim said, we need to be strategic in what we're doing. And so I think that oftentimes we aren't. Like, we can identify that our parent training billing codes are not being converted. You know, we've got a lot of hours for parent training that may not have been implemented, or attendance is low. And so this is where I think as behavior analysts, we are experts at analyzing data. So let's be systematic about it. Let's look at that either across your organization or across providers, and then make an intervention. So we say, hey, me as a provider, I'm at like a 15% attendance for parent training sessions. So I'm going to draw a phase change line. And this month, I'm going to follow this 4-step procedure of, I'm going to do what Tim said. I'm going to schedule at a time that works for the family. If they cancel, I'm going to follow up with texts. I am going to reset by talking to them about parent training and listening. I'm going to do that for all my families. And then in 2 months, I'm going to evaluate what that attendance looks like for me. Did it shift or not? If it didn't shift, let's change and do something else. Because I think if we just throw everything at it and we're not systematic, that's where we start to lose identifying what actually is working as an organization and for families. Because some families may hate to get the text messages. Like, they don't want you to be texting them all the time that you're coming. Some may love it. I don't know. But again, just remembering to be analytic in how we interact with these data around cancellations, and then let that guide us in making decisions. So that is what we have for you today. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to your CSL for care coordinator, or you can reach out to Tim and I directly. We love your questions and feedback. This is the last in our 3-part webinar series, but we do have a 4th one coming. So look out for that for an email. It's actually going to be 1 hour long and be CEU eligible. So if you want to get some of those CEUs, those will be coming your way, and it will focus on values, right, Tim? We landed on values and parent training.
Yeah, I think it's going to have some good themes across this series, but it's also going to give us a little bit more time to expand on some of those. So again, you're left with something actionable.
Yeah. So we hope you enjoyed our series, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thanks very much.